Something maybe a little more core to the day-to-day here at Uptick. Friend of the pod, and in full disclosure, I am an advisor to this company. I'm an advisor because I think their product's really interesting. So the company Spindl, Spindl, they announced today something they've been working on for a while, which is what they're positioning as the first truly on-chain ad network. I think this is super interesting. Historically, Uptick has, we work in traditional gaming, but we also work in the web3 and kind of everything in between. And traditionally for web3 products, we've been saying, hey, don't do paid advertising. It's too hard to hit the right people because it's such a needle in a haystack for these ideal users. So anyway, Spindl has launched what they call as the first on-chain ad network. We'll probably have Antonio, the CEO and founder, on here sometime soon to go deep on this. But I thought it was interesting to at least dig through the announcement and talk about this a little bit, talk about the implications. So for a few highlights, and we'll link to the article from CoinDesk. So they're saying that this is the first Web3 native ad network. Other networks claim to be Web3 native, but don't actually do anything on chain, just resell inventory for crypto publishers. Yes, I would say that's my experience. It's just people, selling ads on crypto websites. Or I've seen some really shoddy products where they say they're doing targeting of Web3 users, and then you kind of kick the tires and grill them a bit. And it's just interest-based targeting. It's just basically people that have built a targeting layer of people who like Bored Apes. It's okay, dude, this is not on-chain advertising. So for a little more context of what's going on, the core experience here is in-wallet ads. So for anyone who has a Web3 wallet, there's increasingly content that's presented in these wallets as well. So think of interactive ad experiences that are starting to populate within these wallets. And what this is letting you do with Spindl's product, and I think we'll see this sector emerge, is new layers of targeting and new business models for paying for your advertising. So to touch quickly on both of those. So new forms of targeting. I'll just read the example from the article. This was a quote from Serotonin, who is an agency that's an early partner for this. A lot of our clients are looking for Web3 native ways to target new users. A traditional way of targeting someone might be to find out who follows Louis Vuitton on Twitter and also follows a Web3 account. That's a quote. And then for context, it says that's crude compared to what you can do with on-chain data. Search for users who have minted an NFT in a given time period, say the last 24 hours, and then whittle down the results to someone who actually invested in any kind of Web3 token or collectible. So then the example they gave, you could whittle down maybe 50,000 users who meet the interest criteria to maybe just a couple of thousand that have also completed the on-chain actions. So hopefully that made sense. So rather than just people that have the interest in Louis Vuitton and crypto stuff, it's no, get us a subset of those that have actually done a on-chain purchase within the last 72 hours and only show the advertising to those. In theory, this creates a win-win because for all kinds of performance marketing, you're always looking for a needle in a haystack, and you're always spending a lot of your budget to people that have no chance of converting. And this is to a factor of 10 when you're doing Web3 marketing, because it's such a small percentage of the population that actually do anything on chain. So this answers the need of marketers like us that are trying to hit Web3 natives, but lack provable ways to target those people. And also, if you're selling this inventory, hey, guess what? You can charge 10 times as much now because you're giving people like Uptick exactly the inventory that we want when we're trying to reach out to Web3 natives. So I think this is super interesting. I'm expecting, we'll have Antonio on and grill him on this, but I'm expecting we'll kind of have the primitive months of this, and there's not going to be a lot of scale necessarily because it is still an emerging part of the market. But I think this is what we need to kind of start opening up performance marketing best practices to Web3. And I have one more thing, then I'll go to you, Xander. The other interesting thing about this is payment models for performance marketing. So historically, you're buying traffic on what is called CPM. This is, cost per impression based traffic, cost per click, cost per install, or, the gold standard today is in-app actions for mobile or, website actions for something on PC. This opens up a whole new model of being able to bid and pay out on-chain actions. So say that you are launching a new blockchain and you're really interested in advertising to get people that create transactions on your blockchain. You can do this in wallet advertising and have a model where maybe you pay a penny for every net new user that takes their first on-chain action. You can actually track and reward this with this model. And Spindl's using their attribution tech for this. But B, you can also do this in a truly neutral way. So like the logic can be coded into a smart contract where it just creates this neutral payment mechanism where for an advertiser, you're funding the smart contract, and then the action is only being rewarded when it can be verified on chain that it's been completed. So I think that it also creates a unique lever for a fairness layer in just making sure that advertising is correctly compensated when the goal is met. So there's a lot to unpack there. Early days of this tech, but Xander, what do you think about this announcement? Is this the time where Uptick finally starts telling our Web3 clients, hey, maybe we should do a bit of advertising?
Maybe. I mean, first and foremost, I think Antonio is like one of the biggest brains of Web3. I mean, just every time I talk to him, he's been thinking like 4 steps ahead on this. He's been talking about this concept for like a year and a half. Like basically since I met him, he's been talking about this idea. And I think because he was so early in the ad tech industry, you know, he was at Facebook or he was at Twitter early when they were building their ad products. Like he's like seen this before and he's like, all right, let me re-instrument what were we doing then now. And like we described it as AEO, right? I mean, basically when you're talking about AEO meaning app event optimization, right? So what that basically means is in Facebook years and years ago rolled out the ability to do what Warren said, which is you pay for a purchase within an app as opposed to an install or just per seeing an ad. And that is what their default, I mean, in the article, he says this is basically the default methodology of billing will be when you do the action that you want, which means that you're only paying for really, really high value actions and users, which is great from a performance marketer's perspective. One of the other things, I'm not sure if it's specifically addressed in this article, but he talked about the fact that because it's all on the blockchain, if you have a user that generates recurring revenue, so if I bring in a gamer and they want to buy one NFT and they transact and buy more NFTs over time, because of the fact that it's on the blockchain now, all that's visible and public, and you can provide an ongoing referral fee to the person who drove that user to you. And so I don't know if they talked about this specifically, but he's also talked to me about that in the past. Right. I think it's really, really interesting because it basically sort of levels the playing field and increases the value of that referral. And then in a transparent way allows you to share the value accrued by the project upstream to the people bringing value to the project.
Conversely, can lower the upfront cost to acquire a customer because there's a longer term payback model.
Right, which is super, super interesting. And it's like, this is actually something that's interesting about Web3. It's like, this is something you can actually only do on the blockchain. And so this would be once being like, okay, do we find a really, really good use case which sort of aligns the incentives with the technology at a time, at a place we could actually drive incremental value in a way that you couldn't do from the previous layers of technology. And so, I mean, like I said, this guy's fucking brilliant. And I think that this is a really, really, really interesting use case. And I'm excited to see.
Don't say too many nice things about Antonio. He's got,
I just joking. Antonio
can't make it any bigger. Yeah.
He does. That's true. He does. One of the, I think it's interesting here is you can pay in crypto, which is something that's not hugely important, but it is interesting.
Yeah, I think the other thing that comes to mind in just sort of like topics that we beat to death here on the podcast is we see this sector of performance marketing starting to mature a little bit while traditional performance marketing gets more and more opaque and our existing systems break down with more and more privacy layers and noise in our data for traditional performance marketing. So it's just interesting to see these things happening in parallel.
Yeah.
Let's go on. What's up next today, Xander?